Good evening, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Bhakti Community. We welcome you all to our Bhakti Wisdom series, a place where you hear from various timeless texts. Our topic for today is compassion, and our host tonight is Navina, a spiritual entrepreneur practicing Bhakti Yoga for 4 decades. He conducts many seminars and is a most sought after energetic speaker. My name is Pavani Bhakti and Anushri is managing social media today. Welcome to the show, Navina.
Thank you, Pavani, for having me.
Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in to Bhakti community. I offer my respects to Srila Prabhupada, all my spiritual teachers, and to all of you. So today's topic is compassion. Compassion is a big topic, and I just came down from New York to Florida today. And while I was walking in New York near Columbus Circle at the entrance of Central Park, there was one young lady, and on the back of her jacket, she had painted, as she wore a black leather jacket, and she had painted with white color, "Nobody cares." And I stopped her and talked to her, and it was quite an interesting discussion. So the topic today is compassion. What is compassion? What is the proper way of showing compassion? What are some of the things we can do in order to develop compassion? Compassion is considered in all the spiritual traditions to be one of the great virtues, one of the great qualities that are beneficial and that should be acquired. I think most people will agree with that. The word comes from Latin. Cum means together, and passion means suffering. So to suffer with others or to take on their suffering. In the yogic tradition, it says that teachers, doctors, and spiritual masters can never be fully healthy because they always take on suffering from their patients, their students, or their disciples. So if you want to get into the compassion business, be ready to, to suffer. And that brings us to the first point, that what is actual compassion? You cannot fake empathy or compassion, because otherwise it will be considered as just fake compassion. So oftentimes we see people, they may speak very nicely, but then in their actions, they don't back it up with actual deeds. So it stays on the verbal or on the superficial and the shallow platform, and it does not really touch the heart. Just like if I say, I'm very happy to see you, but my expression does not actually show that I'm happy or that I care, then it's my words and my actions are contradicting each other, and it sends a very confusing or an insincere signal to the person. Have you ever had the experience of something like that in your own life? Yeah, I think it's quite a common scenario. So if we introspect and see how we can avoid such kind of scenarios, it forces us to go a little deeper in our understanding what is compassion and how we can actually manifest proper forms of compassion. Sometimes people think compassion is it just looks nice on your resume. You know, I'm a really caring person. I'm compassionate. I'm really empathic. I've heard this from people who were total narcissists and even complete psychopaths. And it was quite shocking to me. How can they put that? How can they say that when it's like quite the opposite? But honestly speaking, many people are fully convinced that they're actually empathic and actually compassionate. They just either don't know what it means or they're incapable of actually expressing it. But it also shows that in the heart of hearts of every sincere person, they actually want to show compassion for others because they understand it's something good. It's something that actually is helpful. In the Bhagavad Gita, the main yoga text, in the 16th chapter, in the first 3 verses, there is a list of good qualities that are to be acquired by a practitioner of the yoga path. And so it says, Daya Bhuteshu. Daya means to have compassion, and Bhuteshu means to all living entities. Another very popular sutra or saying in the yoga world is Sarve Sukhino Bhavantu. Sarve means all living entities. Sukhine means happiness. Bhavantu, may experience or may live in happiness. May all living entities live in happiness. So there comes the crux of the matter, that real compassion is not just for my family, for my nation, or for my immediate surroundings, something that is intimately related to me, but it should actually be towards all living entities. It's something universal. Otherwise, it will not actually be compassion, but it will be more like, okay, I want to feel good about myself, or I want to get something out of this situation, so I better be nice. Because if I'm nice, then people generally tend to respond nicely towards me. So, in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, Jiva Goswami, one of the great commentators, he says that the cause of the universe is compassion. That the universe was created to give a playground for each and every living entity to enact their propensities and to experience their desires. So that is a pretty merciful, a pretty compassionate statement, because imagine, like people go into virtual reality, or they take part in so many different types of games or activities, so many amusement parks, so many, like social media, so many settings are created just so people can somehow enact their propensities or try to fulfill their desires. But have you ever thought of it in this way, that the universe is actually here as a playground or as a opportunity for all of us to just enact our desires? So these are some reflections on what is compassion, and we'll have a few reflections and questions on that. You can talk about some experience that you had of proper compassion or of fake compassion, and then we'll examine the topic a little more. Anybody
Yeah.
would like to comment or
Yeah.
ask something?
Feel
Now
free
would
to
be a good
feel
time.
free to unmute. I see a new person today, Shirley. If so, nice to have you, Shirley. I saw you joined like 3 or 5 minutes before the class started. Thank you for your enthusiasm and joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, anybody who's got a question or a comment, please feel free to say something. This is not the Navina talk show. This is our Bhakti community discussion group. So, which means I say a little something, and then I'm interested to hear what are your reflections or thoughts.
Yeah, we have new people today. Vincent, welcome to the show. Stefan, Shirley, Priyanka, Priya, Yogesh, Borg.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Wilson.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Hare Krishna,
Please
Prabhu.
speak up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. No, so I was really resonating with how you spoke about compassion and what it is in its true nature, and how there are so many instances in the world where it just becomes empty promises, and we're not able to substantially be empathetic to other individuals. And I think really looking at that from the Bhakti perspective and how we can substantiate our efforts in that is a very deep and enlightening topic.
Thank you for sharing that reflection with us. Somebody else has some comment or question?
If there's nobody, I would like to say that I have felt in my own life that, something called lip service. Like people would say a lot of things, give you the lip service, but when it comes to the real emotions, it's not there. So it's very hard to connect with that kind of a person. So when you said that this universe is created out of compassion, I was thinking that the divine source has given us all these opportunities, and how much are we really making use of the opportunity that we have got as being a human being. And so that compassion we have to appreciate and get it into and learn from it.
Thank you, Pavani. Somebody else would like to contribute?
Yes, Prabhu, like Mataji was saying that, people do lip service, and I was thinking that that is so true. Like all these sales and marketing people of, different companies like airlines and hotels, and their representatives seem to speak so sweetly as if they're so, they're so compassionate and they care so much about your comfort and everything, but truly it's not there. It's just a manner probably.
Thank you. Well, that also brings us to the next topic, which is that sometimes compassion can fade, especially if it's on a material platform. There's something like compassion fatigue, which is experienced by people who work in the service industry or in hospitals, or they have to continuously take care of other people. And it's can be stressful, it can be depleting, it can be even very burdening at times, especially if the person is not properly trained or prepared for this kind of work. So that's something that is a big topic in the service industry, and the industry has responded with different ways of how to give incentives to people who do that kind of work in order to keep them motivated or to put training in place or to have assessment there. It's all part of the service industry package. But if we are talking now genuine compassion one-on-one, one thing that personally speaking strikes me a lot is I realize my own limitations. And I feel that's something to acknowledge, and it's something to be honest about, that I'm a small living entity and I have a limited amount of resources, time, and energy. So that being said, when I'm dealing with individuals and I make them feel like I'm impatient or I am not really concerned or caring for them, then that comes across oftentimes as insincere, as superficial, or as expedient. So I have to catch myself not to fall into that trap, because it's very easy to fall into that trap, especially if you're faced with a repetitive scenario of people trying to get something from you or trying to interact with you. And after a while, what comes in is like, it's called compassion fatigue. You become tired. You become tired. I don't know if any one of you has experienced that, but it can happen in any activity, even in parenting, or you have that friend who calls you back for the 10th time to talk about the same topic, about the same issue that you've already talked for hours and hours at length, threadbare, ad infinitum or ad nauseum, till you became sick of it. And then you just see the name on the phone and you go like, oh no, not again. Should I pick up this call or not? So then, what is proper compassion and what is not proper compassion? In the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is telling Krishna, I don't want to fight because it doesn't look good, you know? If I win, then everyone else is dead, and who can I enjoy with? And if I don't win, then I die. That's also not such a great idea. So basically, it's lose-lose. So I don't want to do this. And he is putting out so many arguments why he shouldn't do what he's been asked to do. So it's important for us to go a little deeper and analyze what is actual compassion and how we can show compassion in a way that's actually beneficial for others. Sometimes compassion may mean that we have to speak strong words, just like a parent or a teacher or a doctor has to tell their subordinates or their patients or their students that what they don't want to hear. And it may not always immediately be appreciated, but on the long run, it will be in the benefit of the other party. So true compassion really means that we're not just looking for an immediate pleasure sensation to please that person, but we really have the welfare, the well-being, the long-term benefit of that person at heart. And we take into account that that person may initially not respond so favorably. They may initially be a little bit uneasy. Of course, it's an art to learn how to communicate the message in an appealing, in a pleasing manner. Yet, we also know that sometimes the truth may hurt, and we may have to just speak words that are truthful and that the person may be a little bit startled by. So these are some reflections. I'd like to hear your take on it. And I know you never do that. You never criticize people. You never put people in place, but you may have had certain experiences of what I've just mentioned, where you feel drained or incapable of properly reciprocating with the situation that be, and you have realized that maybe I'm limited in my resources of being compassionate. Has this ever happened to you, folks, or is it just me?
Yes, Prabhu. I think it happens a lot. Like a lot of times, like I have a couple of friends, and when they are going through difficult times, and they come and talk to us, the first thing I think is just to listen to them. But then at the same time, I really want to help, and I want to tell them that they should also start listening to or reading some spiritual books, or talk to somebody on these lines, and that will really help them and give them comfort. But sometimes they are not ready to receive, and we feel really helpless, and we want to help but don't know how. So so I feel that, I mean, I'm in my mind, I'm really compassionate, but probably they are not thinking. They are thinking I am just giving them a lecture, or
Yeah, I know. It sounds familiar. Thank you for sharing. Somebody else had something they wanted to contribute? Maybe Vincent or Stephen?
Yeah, I think I can relate to the difficulty in remaining like patient and compassionate, and also balancing that with being truthful and in a constructive way. I recently had an experience, which I told you a little bit about, where I had to tell it pretty straight to someone because there's some toxic behavior that was affecting different folks in different parts of the community that were working together on different projects, and over several months I kind of tried to work with this individual and really tried to just find different positive things to work on, as opposed to address some of the negativity that had been, things that were being said about other people, or just in general non-cooperation with other folks who I was also working with. And so after a while, it kind of came to a head, and I had to be very straight up with him and say that there's a lot of negativity here, And I understand, that I can't get along with everyone all the time. We all have different styles, we all have different goals, but we can't behave in such a way that that people become disgusted, with each other. And so I had to, have a very straight talk with him, and to be honest, it kind of blew up in my face. But I learned a lot in that because I realized that there were probably some underlying assumptions, like maybe he was going through something that I wasn't aware of. Maybe there are cultural values. Like I grew up in the United States. He grew up in he grew up in India and came over here as a student, and so and then also just different personalities. That I probably could have taken a step back and said, you know what, like let me try to see this from his angle. Let me try to give him a little bit more benefit of the doubt. Although I thought until that point I had. So in any case, I kind of experienced that fatigue, and then what I realized, next time this happens, maybe to have either some sort of mediation or just to step back entirely, and kind of avoid the confrontation, as opposed to kind of like, as opposed to adding additional pressure to the situation and then having it kind of backfire.
Thank you, Winston, for sharing your experience. Stephen, anything from the snowy slopes of Boulder, Colorado?
Hare Krishna Prabhu from the snowy slopes. Said that wrong, but
they say the slippery slopes, but
that's it. A burning question that's kind of been on my mind from the beginning of the conversation would be the aspect of the shadow self and what the Bhakti perspective would be about actually doing like the deep inner work to allow you to be fully present and embrace full compassion, empathy with any other entity. Is there a protocol for that within the Bhakti tradition? I'm sure it's expansive.
What do you mean by the shadow self?
The term for I guess I'm not exactly certain, but the aspects of your personality that would be getting masked through childhood traumas, through life experiences, behavioral patterns, and stuff that would inhibit you from.
Yes, thank
you. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, we all carry our baggage. We all have our history going through the world of names, and we have it's called samskaras, or our impressions that we have accrued, that we have accumulated. And they do definitely form us. In fact, they have given us this gross and subtle body. This body that we're in right now, and the mind that we're having right now, or the mindset that we're having right now, is formed through our previous experiences. So it is definitely a fact. It's not something that we can just discard. So yes, the Bhakti tradition has very valuable tools, and it's called sadhana, or a spiritual practice. By creating positive habits, by creating mini habits, especially spiritual habits, we can overcome our tendencies and our lower nature. Just like, for instance, I may have a nature that's very fearful. Like sometimes you see these people that are they're very shy, timid, or fearful. And then by understanding their true identity, that actually this fear is something that's just, that's just baggage. It's not really part of my persona. It's just part of my phobia. It's part of my false perception of self. Then that can help, especially by creating positive impressions through spiritual practice. One can go through these. Of course, sometimes people have serious issues and they need to get professional help in order to deal with them. But to have a clear understanding of self and of identity is definitely foundational in the Bhakti practice. That's why we read Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vedas, to get a clear sense of self. Otherwise, it's very easy to accept identities in the world of names that have been just imposed upon me through circumstantial situations, like our job, our nationality, our age, our gender, etc., etc. These are just situational identities that have been imposed upon us, but that actually do not reflect our true spiritual persona. So that's an important thing to understand. Otherwise, we will always act according to external impulses, and that can lead us into shallow or treacherous waters, so to speak, because we may go off on a wrong tangent. Thank you for bringing this up, Stephen. So I like to talk a little bit about when we are faced with a person that approaches us and is asking for help, to actually give full undivided attention to the individual that is in front of us. And it may be something very, very profane. Like, I was just traveling today and I was faced oftentimes with the situation of like, okay, where is Terminal D in Atlanta Airport? It's a big place. And you go up to somebody in a uniform and you'd be surprised of the different types of reactions that you can get, even from people in the service industry. Some seem to be annoyed, some seem to ignore you, and some are super helpful and friendly, and they're fully there with you. And I'm sure you've had this experience like on a daily basis, where people are either switched on, or they're totally switched off, or they're just in a very mechanistic type of way they're dealing with the situation. So we are people, we are sentient beings, we have feelings. Compassion is not just a one-layered experience, but it is actually feeling compassion for the body, the mind, the emotions, and the soul. It is a complete package. So for me, what helps me, because I'm in the field of teaching, education, and also I deal a lot with volunteers and outreach activities, counseling different types of people from different walks of life. And so I'd like to, in the next few minutes, just share a couple of tips of a few takeaways of what has helped me not to get into compassion fatigue or fake compassion, which are really to be avoided because they just kill it. They just ruin it right there. So as I mentioned, number one, to really be fully present and fully there for the person or the persons, if it's a group, that we're interacting with. No distractions, no multitasking, no absent-mindedness, because that will really take away from the experience. Have you ever been in a meeting or in a discussion and somebody picked up their phone and started fiddling around with their phone while you were talking? Or even worse, while they were talking and not looking at you, but looking at their phone, right? It just sends a very strong message that hey, I don't really care about you, I mean, I'm just doing my job, and I'm not even getting paid for it. So why should I actually care? But when we know that everything actually matters and that people are sentient beings, they pay attention to details. They're actually aware. There is consciousness there. So then we become a little more sensitive in how we carry ourselves in such situations. Another thing is that just accept the suffering. When some suffering comes and when people share their suffering, then if you actually take part in it, you kind of experience part of that. And it sounds heavy and it sounds like, oh, do I really want this? But it just comes as part of the package. You can't avoid it. Like when somebody tells you about the accident that they had and then, they got injured and you actually take part in that, you take on part of that suffering on a subtle, on an emotional, plane. Which brings us to the next point. What just really helped me is to have a daily inspirational practice where I am deeply connected to the source of all compassion, because I realize my limitations. I realize I cannot be sustainably compassionate if I am not connected to Krishna, which is the source of all compassion. It's like you touch a live wire, but you don't have any grounding. You're not grounded. Then it just hits you. It just really hurts you. But if you're well grounded and you're very deep rooted in your spiritual practice, then no matter what life throws at you, you can process it and you can pass it on. The good and the bad. Sometimes people may come and they may lavish praise on you, or compliments or appreciation or gifts, and you may feel like this is too much. I can't deal with this. It's just not possible. So an art, a skill is to pass it up, to just give it to your teachers, give it to your mentors, give it to your parents, give it to the people who made you who you are. Give it to Krishna. He can handle it. He can take it. And in a similar way, when people tell you their grief, and believe it or not, people will tell you their grief. Have you ever had the experience of somebody give you a piece of their mind, and the piece was a little bigger than you thought you could handle, and you're still chewing on it, just even remembering it right now? I don't want to have you go through any traumatic or dramatic experiences here. That's not the purpose of this class. But people are living in this world through some heavy experiences. And when they are sharing that, we have to be ready to take on that, whatever it is that they want to share with us, and we have to know how to deal with it. So without judging, without jumping in and giving them solutions, without shutting them down, and also without just sentimentally sympathizing without any real substance and without being able to actually benefit them. So to realize that in this world there is suffering. It's a fact. And the suffering is created because of misidentification and misappropriation that we are experiencing on a daily basis in this world. Yet if somebody actually listens to us, and I'm sure you've had that experience, there's a saying that in German, geteiltes Leid ist halbes Leid, which means if you share your suffering, then it's only half the suffering. It's only half the misery, so to speak. So part of sharing our heart means we're sharing our joys, our fears, and also our pains. And when we do that, then we should be willing and open to hear some words of consolement, but also of some pointers or some advice. So usually you will be facing this scenario that whether you're sharing with someone or you are on the receiving end, you're listening to someone, usually at the end, when the person is done sharing, there is that moment of silence. I call it the moment of truth. Sometimes it never comes. People just want to keep on, downloading. They just want to keep on talking because they have such a backup, such a backlog. So then oftentimes I found it's a good practice. Maybe you just go for a walk, just go into nature and be in an environment where it's possible for the person to actually find some peace and comfort. Sometimes they just have to really vent and get it off their chest before you can even deal with it. But then when you get to that point, first thing is acknowledge the person. Acknowledge them and accept what they said and appreciate them. Don't just go off on a tangent or tell them your conclusion that you already made up your mind right before they started telling you what they were about to tell you. Because that's very counterproductive and it really jeopardizes the relationship. So to actually show compassion means that I'm concerned for the well-being of all living entities, but especially of this person who is right in front of me now. And I see it as my sacred duty, as my service, as my privilege to help this person, either to be a soundboard or to just be a friend or to be an advisor or to give them a little bit of tough love, a bit of serious advice. And that really requires that I am in touch with the master of the heart who will give me direction in how to deal with this person. Because I'm sure you've had situations where you felt like this was beyond you, like it was really hard to deal with this person or with this situation. Have you ever had situations like that? That you were really like tested? It was like almost beyond the limit. And we may not be prepared for that. We may not be trained for that. But if we sincerely say a little prayer and go in our heart of hearts, and we're just sincere and we appreciate the person, then that is already more than half the rent. I can guarantee you that. And then giving some solace and maybe a few pointers. You may feel you're not the person who's qualified to deal with this, so you may direct them to somebody else or to give them some other opportunities where they can actually get some help. So these are all things that I found were helpful in my experience in dealing with compassion fatigue, and associated topics. Any questions or comments or reflections? I see a lot of smiling faces and I feel your compassion towards me, but I would like to get your contributions as well. Björg Ida Hoyen, would you like to say something?
Hi, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you. It's yeah, I'm just sitting here. I'm reflecting on a lot of things that you're saying, both as a teacher, care person, and as a mother, and about, you know, the importance of setting healthy boundaries, to be able to, I mean, particularly as a mother, I think, you know, come to learn maybe the hard way to, you know, if I'm not happy, my kids, it will affect my kids. So it's important to really look after myself, have compassion with myself, so I can actually have it with them. And it's interesting how you showed so many sort of different aspects of compassion that I hadn't thought about before. And it's really helpful, you know. I'll take that with me and pass on in my own words and experience, you know, the reflections that come up for me because of that. And yeah, I think it's and it actually made me think when I heard, I can't remember his name, it was telling about a situation that blew up in his face. He just spoke earlier, and it was just interesting. I realized, I had a realization about it, something that happened to me yesterday, that after I was teaching a yoga class and I was quite zen, and I was just listening to something on the air after the class, quickly jumping into a Zoom call and just listening to some wisdom. And I sort of, not to go into too much detail, But I went into the bathroom whilst I was listening to this on the speaker, and someone outside waiting to use the bathroom was feeling a little bit impatient maybe, and obviously thinking that I was just in there taking my time, not realizing I was multitasking. And so she quite aggressively sort of slammed the door and, well, you know, what's going on, you're going to get out of there. And I wasn't taking very long either. And so I sort of thought before I opened the door to go out, I was wondering what's going to meet me here and how am I going to respond? Because my initial response was like, oh, that was very aggressive. And I came out and she literally just oogled me like with a very angry look and just sort of muttered under her breath how rude I was. And I thought, yeah, I could respond. But then I was also really into, you know, the wisdom that I was listening to. And I thought, no, this is just Maya trying to get my attention away. So I'm just going to go back and focus on what I was talking and not respond and not have a reaction. And when I was talking now, or listening to you now, I think I realized, oh, I was actually maybe showing her compassion by not actually reacting and, you know, lashing out, because I could have lashed out, but that wouldn't have helped anyone. So it's teaching me, like, every day, you know, the importance, what I'm trying to strive for, of seeing what is it actually people need and how can I actually help them, rather to take it personal and react, you know, in a negative way. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That was very helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah, recently one friend of mine wrote me a text on Skype. I know many of you are not aware of what Skype is. It's old school. So, and he just asked me, how are you? And then I replied and I said, that question can be answered in many different ways. Like, just that was my reply. And then his response was, just say that you're well. We all got issues. And I thought, like, you know, you asked for it. So do you want me to tell you or not? But I really like that point, that showing our compassion often means not even saying anything, but just listening and appreciating, accepting, because that's often what a person needs, and seeing what their needs, what their feelings are. In the Bhagavatam, we have the story of Draupadi, who showed compassion to Kripi, who was the mother of Ashwatthama. And she spared the life of Ashwatthama because she did not want Kripi to suffer the loss of her son, just like she had suffered the loss of her sons. So she put herself in the shoes of the other person, and she made her decision based on that, not on an emotional response. Oh, I want justice, I have my vengeance, and I want retribution for that. So it means sometimes we just have to take it and absorb it. And again, that brings us back to the point that if we are deep in our spiritual practice and we are grounded, we are well rooted, then we can actually take a lot, because it's not our own capacity, but we're actually connected to Krishna, and Krishna has got us covered. He's backing us up. So whenever you feel you're out of your depth and this is getting too much and you can't take it no more, then please be mindful that if we're truly connecting in our practice through the chanting of the Maha Mantra and our practice of Bhakti Yoga, then there is nothing that actually becomes too much for us, because we're not doing this on our own behalf, for our own sake, for our own purpose, but we're actually doing this as a service. We're doing this for a greater cause. So we discussed compassion today. What is compassion? What are some of the fake or fading ways of compassion and compassion fatigue? How not to fall into those traps? How to have a spiritual practice that will actually enable us to take on more than we ever thought, because believe it or not, whether you sign up as a teacher, a parent, or as any type of caregiver, you will face situations that are beyond your abilities. And a few takeaways, a few tips, how to be fully present for the person, to accept them, to share in their experience and in their suffering, and then not to be judgmental or immediately giving them solutions, and to wait for that opportune moment to make a little contribution, to insert something, a little bit of wisdom, and to be in touch with Krishna, the Lord in the heart, who will guide us to say the right thing and to behave in the right way. Thank you for tuning into Bhakti Community tonight. Thank you, Pavani, for having us all here. And looking forward to seeing you soon on the same channel. Have a great week. And thank you for caring. It is duly appreciated. The cause of the universe is compassion. That should be our motto, our mantra, our slogan for the week. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Navina.
Thank you, Prabhu.
It was a very, very practical class and a lot of reflections. Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
All the best. See you guys soon.
Thank you for everyone's participation also today. Bye.